Welcome to Polygon Issuance number 86 for Black Friday, the 27th of November, 2015. Jeff Wilcox here with you, and I got to turn that off. Okay. So it's me, myself, and I. I'll turn my camera on just to show why I see. I don't think anybody wants to see one of my thermals there, but as you can see, lighting in here is not the best, so that's why the camera's off. So, but we're going to discuss some weather as long as my computer wants me to. So, but there's a lot of interesting weather that is taking place right now across the country. Last week, of course, those that watched last week and watched the snowfall across the state, at least where I live in Iowa, we had 7 inches of snow here, of which we had probably about 5 or 5.5 of it actually stuck. It's all melted. It's mostly gone except for the piles, because temperatures late this past week warmed up into the 50s, and then we had 1.5 inches of rain that pretty much really melted the rest of it. But what's going on now across the country, and let me make sure I get this. This is the satellite image. Let me make sure it's in here properly. Okay. So you can see here, we have this plume of moisture going across the Texas, Oklahoma. The cloudiness extends all the way through the Great Lakes into the Canadian Maritimes, and a lot of cold air. We're not talking like bitter cold. We're talking cold air below freezing is seeping down into the areas around Oklahoma and Texas, especially right in this area. And now the computer has decided to be, okay, just a minute, stupid computer. Right in here is where we've been having a lot of the problems. I'm going to make sure, especially from Oklahoma City west, there is ice storm warnings in effect. They could get upwards of 1 inch of ice. That just sounds horrible. I've heard about a number of power outages there. Anybody in this area down into around Childress, Vernon, Texas, northeastward toward Hobart, maybe Anadarko, Clinton, Oklahoma, and El Reno, up into north central Oklahoma, Enid area, and even into parts of south central Kansas, mainly areas from about Wichita west to between at least Wichita and Dodge City. From there, southwestward in toward Vernon to Childress, Texas, right around in this area, if my mouse is being seen, is where the pretty much the worst of the weather is going to be for the next day or so. If we look down here, a lot of these clouds down here in South Texas are streaming off of Tropical Storm Sandra, which at one point a few days ago was a Category 4 hurricane. The strongest hurricane for so late in the season in the Western Hemisphere, I found out. It was upwards of 145 miles an hour. It's only that for one advisory, and then it started to weaken. It just got downgraded to a tropical storm earlier today. It's expected to make landfall in Mexico, probably as a minimal tropical storm, and it's just going to dissipate fairly quickly. Cloudiness and some of the moisture with it will stream into Texas. It's kind of what I'm gathering is it's slightly enhancing this storm here, as this storm is going to take some of the moisture from Sandra as it begins to dissipate. It's going to feed it into this storm, and what we're going to see is this upper level feature that's out over the southwest is going to start to kick out, and it's going to move this storm to the northeast into the Midwest, into my area at least. And this could bring some interesting weather as we move into Monday and Tuesday of next week. So this storm, if we could literally say it covers the areas from, say, El Paso all the way to like Presque Isle, Maine. and even up into New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and even into Newfoundland and Labrador, even the southern parts of Labrador. It's pretty much extending pretty much across the entire country. So that's what's going on across the country at this point. Nothing going on in the northwest. You can see a new storm just offshore that's going to move in probably late this weekend, mainly late Saturday night into Sunday. But it's not overly cold, so at least that's the good thing, at least across the country at this point. But otherwise around here, it's been, I could easily say the last about 3 weeks of weather, we've had about everything. We've had tornadoes, we've had snowstorm, we've had rain, and yesterday there was a little bit of freezing rain in western Iowa. So we've had tornadoes with thunderstorms. So tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, snow, heavy in some cases, freezing rain, and rain. And we've had some sunshine. We've had temperatures at 0 already. It was the, oh gosh, what was it, the night? Saturday night, I think it was Sunday morning. The temperature here, and now I don't have a weather station. The weather person doesn't have a weather station. I did used to have one, but since I live in an apartment building, I really can't have one unless I want to get in trouble. But anyway, the closest ASOS station to my location dropped down to 0 on Sunday morning. And given that ASOS station is 10 miles away, and where I'm stationed kind of in an area that tends to get a little cooler, I probably may have dropped maybe a degree below 0 Sunday morning. So I've likely either had or was very close to having my first sub-zero reading of the season, and it's only November. And then yesterday it was in the mid-50s. Of course, today we've had falling temperatures because we were behind that front. So the temperatures, the highs today were around 40, but that occurred at midnight, and it's right now in the low 30s. So our weather is pretty upside down right about now. So, but otherwise across the country, as I mentioned, it's very active across the central and southern plain states. Lots of heavy rains across the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Again, they've had a lot of rain the last couple of days and pretty much the last year. No drought in Oklahoma and Texas anymore, I can easily say now, which is odd because when I was at NWA in Oklahoma City, it did not rain one day there. And the day that Henry and I left to go back to start heading toward home was the day it started raining, and we had already left by the time it started raining in Oklahoma City. So that's what happened. So we picked the right time to have the meeting down in Oklahoma City last month, to be down there for that. But other than that, there's some other stuff going on. I mean, we'll discuss a little bit. I'm not sure how long I could keep this show going, talking about not a whole heck of a lot going on with regards to the ice storm in Oklahoma and whatnot. But having a lot of ice, I mean, that is something I discussed when we talked about our winter preview a few weeks ago, or if you want to go back and look at that. That was show 80. Oh boy, I'd have to think what episodes those were. Oh, so 3-4 episodes ago, so it was 82 and 83. Yes, shows 82 and 83. We talked about ice storms when we were talking about what type of winter weather we would get and whatnot, and a lot of us mentioned about ice storms. Well, I'd mention here we haven't had an ice storm, a really nasty one, in many years, at least 6, 7, 8 years. Now I wouldn't consider the ice that occurred in western Iowa that was only up to a 1/4 inch. That's not an ice storm. not in the traditional sense. Yes, it did cause some power outages, but what's going on in Oklahoma, that's an ice storm. That when you're going to get possibly upwards of an inch of ice, that's ice storm material right there. So we feel for the people down there that are not going to be having a very great weekend, fairly long weekend, as we're pretty much in from Thanksgiving yesterday, Black Friday today, and then into this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So it's going to be not a very nice weekend to be down there. Even in the areas that are just getting a lot of heavy rain, there's been a lot of urban flooding that I've seen pictures of on Twitter and Facebook. So it's just really kind of nasty down there at this point. But I thought about looking at, well, no, I'm trying to think of something else. But other than that, there's nothing else. There's couples. That system we have to watch to our southwest is producing all the ice that's going to come up here Monday, Tuesday, or late Sunday into Monday and early Tuesday. And it looks like the Atlantic is probably going to end its hurricane season. I don't see anything developing. There was, if you noticed, if that satellite picture, there was a lot of cloudiness off in the Atlantic. That's a mid-latitude type system with an upper level feature. Don't think that's going to turn into anything subtropical or whatnot. I'm sure the Hurricane Center is going to keep watching to make sure of that, but it looks like the hurricane season of 2015 in the Atlantic is probably done. And with the 2015, we had we went up to the letter K. So we had 11 named storms, which is about average. I think average now is 12. And it was 11, so it was moderately kind of boring. Outside of Joaquin, which was a very interesting hurricane earlier in the year, and then Hurricane, I think it was Hurricane Danny. Danny and Joaquin, I believe, are the only two major hurricanes in the Atlantic. Then comparatively speaking to the Pacific, which had so many. The Eastern Pacific is only at Sandra S. They've had stronger years or more named storms in the Eastern Pacific than this year. So, but the Central Pacific went completely gangbusters, with the Central Pacific Hurricane Center having 6 named storms. The old record, I think, was 3 or 4. I think it was 3 or 4 in 82. Might have been 3, and they went through 6, and they don't have that many names. So they went through quite a bit of them there. Of course, the Western Pacific has had quite a number of typhoons and whatnot this year as well. But overall, the weather outside the weather that occurred earlier this week in where the ice storm is. And this is interesting because I saw this on Twitter this morning or last night, that November, this month, and I mentioned this in several years ago, that November is typically a month that anything can happen. Example, on Veterans Day, we had a tornado outbreak in Iowa. Then roughly the same area 10 days later had a snowstorm. Now we bring back up to the ice storm we're talking about now in Oklahoma and into parts of Texas and Kansas, and those areas are just slightly to the west of there, had tornadoes on Monday or a week ago Monday. I can't remember which one it was. It was a week ago Monday. Yes, a week ago Monday. So roughly about 10 days again. So twice this month, we went from tornadoes to 10 days later having winter weather. Iowa went from tornadoes to snow. Parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas went from tornadoes to ice and snow. So you with November, expect the unexpected, expect anything. From tornadoes to snowstorms to blizzards to ice storms, that's what November seems to bring when we have this month of the year in November. We typically just have all this crazy weather. And it looks to probably continue maybe into the early parts of December. And I'm sorry I'm yawning. Gosh, I don't know why I'm yawning. But that's what's going on and what's happened across at least the country at this point. But given that it is Thanksgiving weekend, and Thanksgiving was yesterday, I would be thankful for all the people that have been on the show over the last, gosh, how long have we been doing this show? Or at least I've been doing the show. Of course, I've not been on every episode. This is show 86. The show, if we don't count the first two episodes, which were done in the summer of 2013, our show has been on since March of last year. So we've been doing this 20 months, a year and 8 months. And I've had numerous guests on from education to TV to the government, from all across the country and in other countries and whatnot. So I'm thankful for that. Thankful for the Weather Network that I'm a part of, that all started back, and I'll easily say this. I started my blog, which no longer exists now. It's been merged into, back right after 2008. Right after the 2008 flood. Because 2008 was a really nasty weather year. We had the tornado, the Parkersburg EF5 tornado, the Little Sioux tornado that hit the Boy Scout camp, killing 4 Boy Scouts. And then we had the flood of 2008. And I started the blog. It was about 2 weeks after the flood was at its peak. So I started the blog. And it was doing really well. And I did it pretty much by myself. Had virtually no help. And was having to be up for hours and hours doing severe weather postings. I would be up for like 17 hours a day doing it. And there were some cases where, and I'm trying to think of the one day that I did this. This was back, I think, either in the first, it might have been the second year I did the blog, that I was up for 17 straight hours doing severe weather posting. And I thought, and this was back, and I'll mention this now, I was doing that on dial-up. I did not have high-speed internet until 2010, and I started the blog in 2008. So for 2 years plus, I did not have high-speed internet and was running a blog. And in some cases was putting out stuff as quickly as I possibly could. And in a lot of cases, the warnings went out, and I didn't have automated system like we do mostly now when on the Iowa Weather Network page or website, where it's mostly automated. I was putting it all in by hand, and I was doing it on dial-up. So we've come a long way from back when my blog was that and whatnot. But going back to why I started the blog, 2008 seemed like a good time to do it. If I had started it about 2 months earlier than that, I probably would have burned myself out right after the flood, because of all the stuff I would have had to do during the flood, during all the tornadoes and whatnot. Of course, I was using I was using dial-up. So using dial-up internet, even today, dial-up internet would be considered just archaic now compared to what it used to be. But what I did was I wanted to do a website. And I'll say this right now, I'll probably get a little bit in trouble for this. What I used to do and still do occasionally is I would go to the AlabamaWX.com website. That's the site that's James Spann, who was on show 3, I might add. has as his side job or his side business. It is not owned by the TV station ABC 3340. It's owned by Span's company, whatever it's called now. I don't know what I used to know, and it's owned by his company. So, and I wanted to start a website doing my weather blog. So then I wanted to get permission to go use iowawx.com, which I might add was the original website. The original website was not actually called that until the second year, when I finally got up the nerve to get a .com name. It was actually iowawx.wordpress.com, which then became iowawx.com, and now is today iawx.net, which is the current Weather Network site. But I digress, back to the old days. So I actually wanted to make sure I was going to get permission to use that. And it's not like Span would have said, no, you can't use it, because he's in Alabama. But I wanted to get permission because it would have sounded too close to the thing. So I ended up getting permission, and he said that I could do it because, of course, I don't see why not, because free country or whatever. But I wanted to get permission because it would have been exactly similar to how he ran his blog. So I did it and started it back on June 27th, 2008. And that was almost 7.5 years ago. Oh, good night. Now I feel old. And after so many posts, so many warnings that I put out, so much, and I finally, I think 3 years into it, may have been 4. That's when Henry, who's been on as co-host several times, started helping me. And then as we've progressed, we've merged websites together, his, mine, and the old Iowa Skywarn site. We merged them together, and now we have a staff now of, oh shoot, I think we have a staff of 13 people between our Facebook pages, the website, and all the stuff, our chasers that go out in the field. We went from myself, and Henry had his site at the same time. He started his site at the same time, around the same time as mine. And the Skywarn page goes way back, and it's had different owners, but I digress. To go back from me having to use dial-up internet and posting website warnings onto a website to actually being able to do storm coverage, doing this show on Google Hangouts, which didn't exist 7 years ago, and being able to show a tornado live on our stream when we were doing coverage. Of course, right now we haven't been doing coverage because Henry, who pretty much is the home base of this coverage, is in the middle of a renovation, so that's why we haven't done it. But to go from doing everything on dial-up internet to showing tornadoes live on a stream, I've come a long way. The Weather Network's come a long way. Everything is a lot different than it was back when I first started. So I'm thankful for that everything's a lot better. It's and I'll get through this. And for those that would actually look at my YouTube channel, since all the polygons, most of them come from this channel, some of them went through Henry's, that I started the weather report, which I don't even remember what it was called back in the day. I don't even remember what it was called, because you'd have to go back and look. I started doing videos because I wanted to be like Span, evidently, because I already said, earlier, the weather blog that I started was the idea that came from Span, so I wanted to do videos. The first video I ever did, because I did silly videos where I would do SPC outlooks and put them to music and whatnot, and so I wanted to be like the Weather Channel. Back in the day when Weather Channel had weather. I digress. Anyway. So I started doing these things where I'd look at models and whatnot. And I started this, gosh, when did I start it? 2011, I believe it was. Yes, I think so. Yeah. And it was in January. January or early February, I don't remember. 1 month into me doing this is when I had my gallbladder attack, and they had to take my gallbladder out. And this is how weather crazy I must have been. Now this was before I was still doing it all mostly by myself. I think I was still doing it myself. I'm stuck in a hospital. Now I didn't have a laptop, don't have a smartphone at the time, still don't. I'm pretty much completely old school, no smartphone and whatnot. It's either smartphone or food. Which one do you want? I think I'll take food because I think I want to live. I digress. Anyway, so I don't have a laptop, so I can't have internet, so I can't do weather blog for days. I'm like, my gallbladder needs to be taken out. I'm pretty much in a hospital with tubes and IVs and whatnot. And the only thing I'm complaining about is I need a computer. I need to do the weather. They need my services or whatever. Because the interesting thing was about this, the time I was in the hospital, was we had a snowstorm. This was in early March of 2011, I think it was. And all I'm complaining about is I'm not caring about my gallbladder. I'm caring about I need a computer, which I finally did get after I had surgery. So here I am in a hospital room a couple hours after surgery, and I'm on a computer that I got from the hospital on their internet doing doing blogs about winter weather that was occurring, and I'm bandaged up. My entire abdomen was bandaged up from them having to do surgery, my gallbladder surgery, and I'm just doing blogging and whatnot. So that takes a lot of oomph to do that, and so that's why I'm thankful for all the people that help Henry, myself, and Dan, who's all three of us are the co-owners of the Weather Network, so that if one of us happens to be incapacitated, other people can pick up the slack. I don't do the videos every day anymore because it was just becoming too stressful. So I'm thankful for that. All the guests that have been on Polygon, because I wanted to start a show mainly because of Weather Brains, Span's show, but have guests on that Weather Brains wasn't having on. And I can say right off the bat, out of the 80-some shows we've done between me, Henry, and Mike, who's going to be on again, I might add, and I'll mention that when we get to the end, that we've had at least, and I'd have to count this because I actually have the spreadsheet in front of me of our guest lists, that we've had at least 50, maybe 40 guests that we've had on our show that haven't been on Weather Brains. And there are several guests that we've had on that were never on Google Plus, and they came on Google Plus because they wanted to be on my show or our show, Polygon. And I had to get them integrated into Google Plus. Or they had been on Google Plus, but they just made the account and never did anything with it. So that makes me very thankful that they would take the time when a lot of weather people, and as you'd know, weather people, they don't have much time. It's a 24/7 business. Everybody wants their forecast from them now. It's not like it used to be where all you'd have to do is be on television at 5 or 6 or 10 and just do the weather for 2 or 3 minutes, and then you get off and you can go home and lounge around with your coiffed hair and your nice clothes and whatnot. I feel like I'm doing the Span rant or something about this. But it's a 24/7 world. They don't want to watch news at 5, 6, and 10. They want their weather forecast at 3:15 or 7:45 or 2 in the morning. They want it now. They're not going to want it at a certain time. So, but for them to actually take up some of their time to talk about the weather, and there's so many people that want to do it and talk about the weather because it's just their nature, I guess, about that. So I'm thankful for the guests that have been on, thankful for the guests that are coming up, that are going to be on in the next few weeks. Thankful for Henry, who was nice enough to co-host some of the shows at the beginning. Of course, he's very busy, as you all know, and he does a lot of the work in the background with the network, the website that I co-own with him and Dan. To Mike, who's down in Bristol, Tennessee, who's recovering from his surgery. He did go back to work today, so I'm going to shout out Mike right now since he's back at work. And hopefully he's going to be able to not have all the health issues that he's had over the last few years that caused him to miss NWA this year, which he was very distraught about. So for those that want to see him, I believe he is really going to try and go to Norfolk, Virginia in September for NWA in 2016. And I'm going to mention NWA again at the end as well. And I'm thankful for the people watching. In some cases, I'm surprised there's so many people that actually watch this show, given that it's not like we have big names that are co-hosts and we don't have it on television and we don't have 100 million thousand followers, but we're thankful for what we have. It's not the best we can do because all I'm doing is yammering right now anyway, so. And I'm getting a dry throat doing this. This is what I get when it's winter time because it gets so dry that I'm going to need something to drink when this is done. So that's what I'm thankful for at this point. But speaking of NWA, and I'll get this and then we'll try and wrap it up a little bit, even though it's only been about 30 minutes since I started this. But NWA, for those that are NWA members, the election for new officers is and people is ongoing right now. You have till the end of the year to do it. So anybody that's an NWA member should vote. I have already done so. I did that about a week and a half ago. I did it like 3 days after they said that the election, that they put up the stuff online. And I happened to just see it, and I was like, oh, I'll vote now. So there's a lot of good people. It really was hard to pick between some people and not others, and it was so difficult. And I think it's going to be difficult for a lot of people because there's such good candidates out right now. I could easily say this would have been a little bit funny. This was an idea I had floating around, given in the spirit of politics, given that, as many people know, I'm in Iowa. All I have to do is turn on a TV and I'll see a political ad. And the caucus isn't until February 1st. So you can tell already I am already sick of politics. Anyway, I was thinking one of my ideas was using Polygon to have the people debate, having debates for NWA. I don't think that would have been too kind. I think Janice would not have liked that. Janice Bunting being the director of NWA. I don't think she would have liked the idea of having NWA members like having a debate. But I thought, given the season of politics, at least where I live in Iowa, that would have been somewhat funny to do that. But yeah, that wasn't going to work. Especially when we got to the counselors, when there would have been so many of them. I think that would have been a mess. And I might mention that I know one of them has been on the show before. I'm trying to think because I know that's Nate Johnson at WRAL in Raleigh. He's up for a counselor position. He was on show 9, I think. Let me look. I never can tell when people are on it, all these shows. He was on show 9, live from his car. All you see is like half of him on that show. And I'm trying to think of all the other people that, because unfortunately, and I could look it up, you can go to the NWA website, nwas.org, I think it is. and look up the bios of all the people that are running for each position for president, vice president, secretary. The treasurer spot's not being run for because I believe Alan Gerard who's at Weather Service Jackson, Mississippi. There is actually 2 Weather Service Jacksons. Got to denote the difference between Jackson, Kentucky, and Jackson, Mississippi. Of course, anybody who watches Span's severe weather coverage that he does that's on YouTube, it's all over the place, would know that Span mentions Alan Gerard with high authority, being I believe the MIC or the WCM. I don't remember. I'm going to get in trouble. He's like a big wig at he's like the head honcho at the Weather Service in Jackson, Mississippi, who I actually saw at NWA, mind you. And I want to try to get him on this show. But given the fact that the weather typically with an El Nino is going to be very busy down in the South, I'm not going to want to really bother as many people, especially in the South, given that the weather could be quite nasty at any time. So, but anyway, then there's all the counselor positions and whatnot. There's so many people running to pick and choose. It's so annoying. But if you want your voice heard for who you want to be doing or want to be in the realm of NWA, you need to vote if you're an NWA member. If you're not an NWA member, you should be anyway. If you like weather, then you should be an NWA member. And heck, you could become an AMS member too. And I find it funny, I find it interesting too. According to what I saw, I can actually be a CMOS member. For those that may not know what CMOS is, that's the Canadian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society. And if Craig is watching, he can tweet me to say if I said it wrong. Because I know Craig watches. Or at least he watches sometimes, not all the time, but he does watch. So if I said the CMOS thing wrong, he can tweet to me and say that I said it wrong or said it right or whatever. I can actually be a member of that, and I'm not Canadian. I guess. I don't know. Unless it means, because it said something about membership in the United States or something. Unless it means Canadians that live in the United States. Not sure what that means. I guess that's what it means. I don't know. I mean, it said other countries too, which made no sense. But anyway, I digress. So back to the NWA. I got sidetracked. So you need to vote if you're a member. If you're not a member, become a member, and then you can vote. So that's what's coming up. And then talking about the shows coming up, as I mentioned last week, and I even mentioned it the week before, that we're doing a reformat of the show. It's likely going to happen sometime in December. We're not sure because we have guests the next 2 weeks. Next week's show, by the way, is a show. It's going to be on Thursday. That would be December the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of December. And that's going to be with Wayne Hart, who's chief meteorologist at WEHT in Evansville, Indiana. I emailed him in September, and he finally got back to me, which I could understand because he was really busy, because the topic I wanted to discuss with him was the reason he's been so busy the last month or so. It's on the 10-year anniversary of the Evansville tornado that occurred in this month, November 2005, and the Madisonville, Kentucky tornado that ended up being the strongest tornado of 2005. It was an F4. I don't think they were in the, so it's an F4. It was the strongest tornado of 2005 in Madisonville, Kentucky. And those tornadoes occurred within like a few days of each other or something like that. I can't remember. But so that's what we're going to discuss. And we'll discuss his career because he's been in Evansville for like ever. I think he knows every little nook and cranny of the tri-states, Southeast Illinois, Southwest Indiana, and the northwestern-ish part of Kentucky at that point. And then, of course, on December 11th, which is a Friday, which might be our last Friday show, depending on what happens. Brian Busby, who's at, I'm starting to lose my voice, at KMBC in Kansas City, will be on to discuss his lovely career. And then I'm going to get after him as to why he didn't go to a school in Ohio, because he's from Cleveland, but he didn't go to school in Ohio. So I'm gonna get on him after that, which is interesting. And I'll kind of bring this back because he went to St. Louis University, which I find interesting because going back through all the people that I've had on, when I had Steve Hilberg on from the Midwest Regional Climate Center, he went to St. Louis University too, which is like kind of creepy. And then, so we have St. Louis University is like big evidently now. And then, of course, as if you go way back a couple episodes, back to last spring, when we had Dr. Tony Lupo on, who's at the University of Missouri. He was on in March of this year. He wasn't even in the country when he was on our show. And this is why I'm thankful. Dr. Lupo, was in Russia when he did our show. He stayed up until 2 o'clock in the morning, his time in Russia, to be on our show. He is back in the country now. He's back in Missouri. So I'm very thankful that our guests actually, and I was very thankful for that. Thankful for Nick Miller, who's at the BBC and at the Met Office, and he did the show during the day that he was working his overnight shift. So he was on at like 2 in the morning in London. And of course, then the fire alarm went off. So that's why. So I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent about being thankful again, because some of these people have been on where it's been like the middle of the night and they were beyond. But all these people in Missouri in education and whatnot. So, but yeah, Busby's going to be on to talk about that on December 11th. And then probably is going to be the week after that is when we might go through a reformat or not. I know Mike is expected to return. I believe he said he's going to come back for this next episode. He won't be around for the Busby episode because I'll end up doing that. And then we'll do, and we haven't figured out the reformat yet, but it's going to be changed to what it is now. We'll try to get it figured out in the next week, month or so that we can have a good idea of what's going to happen when we get to January and whatnot. But so for those that want to get a hold of me and be thankful for that, you can get a hold of me on Twitter at IowaWX. I'm there. You can follow me, but most of the things I talk about is either what's going to be on Polygon or what the weather is doing here, or that something's happening or whatnot. And you can get to email me, iowawx@gmail.com. What else do I need? There's going to be some other stuff that we're going to have to figure out too with the show too as well. We might get a show Twitter account in the future and whatnot, because that would be a lot better and whatnot. Maybe when I have more than just me talking, we'll be able to actually see people wanting to tweet to us, because my broadband is at this point is I usually turn Twitter and Facebook off because Google Hangouts uses so much bandwidth that the one time that I had Twitter on and had Google Hangouts on, Google Hangouts froze and I could not do anything, but the Hangout still worked. It taped the whole thing until I ended it. So I'm very careful with my bandwidth. So that's why if you're trying to get a hold of me during the show and whatnot, you're not going to be able to, at least until after I'm done. So I'm sorry for that at this point. But when we have more people on, if we start getting more stuff going on, we'll be able to interact with the people, the viewers a little more as we go along. But so thanks to everybody who watched today. Hopefully everybody says some prayers for the people in Oklahoma that are dealing with that horrendous ice storm that's continuing into tonight and into tomorrow. I don't want anything like that coming because ice is the worst thing. I'd rather have a foot of snow than an inch of ice at this point. I just put the kiss of death. I'm going to probably get an inch of ice this year or this winter. So thanks for everybody watching. Thanks for staying with the show for the 20 months it's been on so far. We hope for 20 more months or more. So thanks for being on. Have a safe weekend for those that are in bad weather or even in the good weather. Stay warm, stay cool, depending on what temperature is outside. And we'll see you next week. Goodbye.